What's up, everyone? I'm Scary Without a Mask, and today I'm going to be looking at 5 family friendly Pixar movies that I think might actually be horror films. So, when you think of Pixar movies, you think of animation, you think of family friendly type adventures with the characters in it. You have some incredible, like, heartbreaking stories, like the movie Up. You have ones like Brave, which is just like an adventure. You have The Incredibles, which is about superheroes. They have all different kinds of things within the Pixar universe, but there are some movies in particular within the whole Pixar movie franchise that, if you really sit down and think about it for even like a fraction of a second, if they were made by any other movie company other than like Pixar or Disney or anything that caters more toward like kids and family friendly stuff, these would straight up be horror films. There are 5 that come to my mind when I really think about it, and that's what I'm going to be discussing today. So the first one that comes to mind is Toy Story. Now, the premise of Toy Story on the surface may seem like, it's just this friendly thing. Like, this is what kids would imagine in their head, toys. Their toys come to life when they're not around. The toys go on adventures themselves and talk and act like humans and everything else. It's just this fun kids movie just to sit down and show your kids. They've made the action figures of these characters like Woody and Buzz Lightyear and all of them. It was an iconic movie. They've made 3 sequels since the first Toy Story came out. But when you really sit down and think about it, this sounds awfully like the movie Child's Play, or even the new series Chucky, which is based off of the movies. It's about a doll that comes to life or is possessed by a ghost of some boy, I believe is what the premise was, and he goes around and kills people with a knife. Now, this obviously is way less of the, murder and horror aspect of it and everything else. There's no ghosts as far as we know, but when you really think about it, this kind of seems similar to that. Like, what is making these dolls and these toys come to life? Because it's not just like, Woody and Buzz. It's like every toy, not just in Andy's room. It's toys all over the world that they interact with, that they meet in different locations throughout the series. Um, what makes these toys come to life? And it's kind of creepy to think about that they hide when the humans are gone, or when the humans are in the room, and then they come back to life again. The humans never seem to notice that the toys are moving. So, like I said, if this was made by like a different company or whatever, that'd be kind of genuinely creepy, and what is stopping the toys in the Toy Story franchise from actually coming to life when a human is looking and maybe attacking them or something, or going rogue, and or one of them decides, I don't want to be the pet of this human anymore. I don't want to be like controlled by this person. I want to take him out. And then we get something like Chucky or Annabelle from the Conjuring series. Things like that. It's like, it's really creepy when you sit down and think about it. If this was made by some other company, it wasn't even an animated movie. If this was just straight up like a live action type movie, sort of like what Child's Play was, the whole Toy Story franchise wouldn't be the same anymore. You wouldn't look back at it and think that was a great movie for my kids. Like, this would be like a killer toys coming to life type of story, and it'd be a lot different. It'd be more like a horror story than a Toy Story. The next one that comes to mind when I think of a movie that would be kind of creepy in a different, in a different movie franchise and everything else, is Cars, which is about, just cars living it up, basically acting like humans, doing human like things, talking cars that go on adventures. Like, the first one was all about Lightning McQueen, a race car. He's trying to win this big race and ends up getting lost in some little town and ends up learning a valuable lesson and things like that. Like, that's a good story for kids. But when you sit down and think about it, a lot of questions and red flags suddenly start to rise. Where are all the humans in this universe? Why are the cars acting like humans? Like, there's even And like every type of vehicle that we drive can come to life in the Cars movies. There's ambulances, there's buses and everything. Like, what do they need a bus for if they're all cars? The cars don't get on the bus, so they have a lot of human emotions and things like that. Just like I said with Toy Story, what makes these cars come to life? Did they somehow like take over the humans or kill off all the humans and become human-like, and all this other? If you really think about it in a creepy sort of way, or in like a horror movie sort of way, that is what comes to mind. And also, I feel like if this were made into a horror movie, maybe the cars would look more human-like. Like maybe they would be. I could see it as some kind of like mad scientist does an experiment maybe accidentally fusing a car with a human, and then they got like a mix of that, and that would be how this would be a horror movie. So you get like cars with like human flesh mixed with their metal and all this other stuff. It's like really creepy, and I could see a horror movie director like putting this together if this weren't originally picked up, and made by Pixar and everything else. If this weren't PG and wasn't a family friendly, Cars thing, it's like that's how creepy that would be, and that's why that might actually secretly be a horror franchise in disguise, in a much, dialed down to a much friendlier tone for kids. It kind of reminds me of the movie like Christine, which was about a car that comes to life and kills people. Like, same thing as with Chucky with the Toy Story universe. It's like, what if that like what happened to all the humans in this universe? Why are the cars acting like nothing there's nothing strange going on? Like, why we're behaving like humans? They still have gas stations, they still have hotels and restaurants and all this other stuff, but they're all cars. It's kind of weird to think about. Next up, I'm going to be talking about Monsters, Inc. Now, if you know the premise of this, is that these monsters exist inside our closets. Basically, there's this whole like world of monsters, and they all come through the closets to try and get kids scares so that they can run their factory, Monsters Incorporated, so that they can keep on making a living for themselves and everything else. Now, first of all, that alone, just that premise by itself is really creepy, even just for a kids movie and a Pixar, because kids are afraid of things in being in the closet or under the bed or whatever, and that's like the general premise of a lot of horror films, is like something's gonna jump out and grab me. So just the fact that a family-friendly Pixar movie like this already exists, just with monsters, like obviously they're like big fluffy monsters and they're not all scary looking necessarily, but if they were put in the hands of a horror movie director or writer or anything like that, I could see this being a really scary, like, monster movie, like Monsters in My Closet. There's a whole factory full of them. Even a little girl in the movie that they call Boo, she came through the closet and entered, the monster's world, and they have to try and get her back to her own world and all this other stuff. It's like, it's a really creepy premise, even for a kids movie. So it's already up there as like possibly a horror movie. When you really sit down and think about it, a movie about monsters that try to get kids screams in order to operate is like that's a creepy horror movie premise that someday I could see somebody, making or whatever, and then it'd be like a play on Monsters Inc., but it'd be like a really twisted version of that. That it's already laid out just like that, only it's obviously meant to be funnier and more toned down for kids, but it's all there already. Just a bunch of monsters wandering around, breaking through kids' closets and scaring them. Now, this next thing I'm going to talk about is more of like a batch of a bunch of different movies. I'm talking about all the Pixar movies where animals come to life, and act like humans. So like Finding Nemo, the animals talk, or at least they talk to each other. Like, they don't really interact with the humans as much, but like, or at least in Finding Nemo they don't. But so the movies like Finding Nemo, Ratatouille, even A Bug's Life, and some other ones that where like animals speak to humans and all this other stuff. If this weren't in Pixar, these movies would be pretty creepy, just because movies with animals speaking to humans and stuff is kind of like, are they possessed or whatever? That's just kind of like a horror movie trope, sort of like, it's a creepy thing to think about, Like, what would happen if a rat was talking to a human, or fish were acting like humans, just like with Cars and the Toy Story and everything else. It's like, it kind of reminds me of like Planet of the Apes, in that franchise where the apes start to take on human qualities and learn how to speak and everything else and take over the world. Like, what happens if the fish in the ocean and the rats and bugs and everything else on land start to take over and overthrow the humans? Then what exactly happens? That's why a lot of these could be considered technically horror movies as well, just if you really sit down and think about it for a second. It's like the movies, there was movies with like The Fly. I mean, that was more of a guy being like being put into the body of a fly and a fly being put in his body, but still, it's like just an animal talking to humans is something kind of creepy. Like, it may be fun for little kids, but if you think about it from a horror movie aspect, it's a little bit creepy. If I saw a rat start talking to me and teaching me how to make spaghetti or something, I'd be kind of terrified, to be honest. But that's just me. And finally, I'm going to talk about one of Pixar's most recent movies, Soul. So in the movie Soul, it's about a guy who ends up, he's like living his life, or he's about to get his big break. He's a performer that plays music and everything else, and he's about to get his big break, and then he ends up dying, technically, and his soul goes to this like whole world filled with other souls that then are trying to find their way to Earth. I guess it's like when a human is born, these souls jump from heaven or whatever you want to call it, and then they go, they inhabit that human and everything else. It's a family-friendly thing, and it was honestly a really good movie. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But from a horror movie aspect, having, souls that can possess humans is kind of creepy. And that even happens in this movie. Like, the main character accidentally, his soul ends up in a cat. And then one of the souls that he was interacting with ends up in his body. So it's kind of like this possession and ghost type thing. Like, that's a creepy thing that happens in a lot of horror movies as well. So on the surface, Soul is just a nice movie about like finding yourself kind of and all that other stuff. But in a horror movie, if this were a horror movie, it'd be like any other ghost tale, like a ghost possessing a human and all this other stuff. And now you're suddenly no longer in control of yourself because some other demonic possessed soul has inhabited your body. It's even like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or any of those classic horror movies as well. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. What are some other Pixar movies that you would consider to be secretly horror movies? And what are your reasons for that as well? And also be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. We have more videos coming up all this week, all related to the holiday of Halloween. We're calling it Halloweek. We did this last year as well, so if you haven't seen that series of videos, there's a whole playlist on our channel, so go check that out as well. Thank you for watching this video, everyone, and be sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.